off and talk about kind of my history with magic. This is me at my birthday party when I turned 5 years old on here on the left. And I remember that feeling. For those of you who remember seeing magic for the first time, there's this incredible sense of wonder that you feel, like a giddiness when you feel something that's just inexplicable that happens before you. Now, meanwhile, I was a really shy kid, very shy, very kind of physically like awkward, uncoordinated. And my parents thought, my older sister is super athletic, a lot of my friends, and my parents thought that magic would be something that would help me with, to be more confident, you know, to kind of be more comfortable. So there you can see that I'm starting to learn magic when I'm 5 years old. My dad did it with me as a hobby. And here I am, this is my high school graduation. I'm 51, I was a class of 87. I'm doing a magic trick at my high school graduation. So really just magic becomes an important part of my life at the time. Now I had a lot of magic mentors, but really my main mentor was my father. My father was an amateur magician. He was an attorney. But whenever we would travel or go across the neighborhood or the city or really across the world, he would always perform magic. And it was amazing seeing him perform magic to people. It didn't matter what language people spoke or what culture, and really connect with people. And sadly, when I was tragically, when I was in college, my father got cancer, terminal cancer, and he was not able to practice law anymore. But he then really focused on his magic. And while he was struggling with cancer himself, with getting chemotherapy, he developed a magic show, Stephen the Satisfactory, and he would go to Children's Hospital and Georgetown Medical Center, and he would do magic for kids who were, you know, just to spread a little joy in their lives as they were going through difficult times themselves. And so from my dad, I really learned about just the power of magic. And so when I've been teaching for 30 years, I've been teaching magic as long as I've been teaching anything else. And so here at St. Stephen, St. Agnes, I teach magic to all the fifth graders, and they perform community service as I've taught in lots of different settings. And I really believe, as I experience myself, that magic is something that builds confidence, and it just helps your creativity, all kinds of different things. And so I really learned that from my father. I wanted to share too that I'm an actual wizard. I was inducted a couple years ago into the Order of Merlin. I just wanted to share, that's kind of cool. I'm in the International Brotherhood of Magicians. Anyway, so magic, when you get into magic, it's not just learning the tricks, you learn the history of magic, and you learn all kinds of things. And about 15 years ago, people started writing articles about the psychology of magic. And the interesting thing is that what like psychologists and what neuroscientists were starting to study and starting to discover, magicians have known intuitively for hundreds of years, because they've had to understand attention and awareness and human nature to be able to make magic work. And magic is literally thousands of years old. And so these articles started coming out, and then books started coming out, and I started to really just learn about this really interesting aspect that magic isn't just what happens in your hands, it's really what happens in your brain. And so very quickly, my teaching education started. I don't know if I didn't know anyone connected with Cincinnati Country Day, but right out of college, I started teaching at Cincinnati Country Day. This is 1991. I taught a 7th grade class called Cultural Studies, which amazingly, so this is way ahead of its time. It looked at stereotypes and perception and perspectives. It spent a quarter on a framework and then applied it to modern and ancient African countries, Native American culture, China as well. And so I started to learn. I mean, I was a new teacher and was learning just about how interested students, middle school students, were in learning about what we now call, you know, diversity, equity, and inclusion. At the time, it was just diversity and then multiculturalism. And so I really became interested in that. I should say, as with some of you, I did get my first job through a Carney Sando Boston fair at Cincinnati Country Day. So I moved from Washington, D.C. to Cincinnati for a couple of years, came to St. Stephen, St. Agnes in 1993, where I taught Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry, and was with a group of teachers, formed a group called Unite. And so was really getting into diversity and multiculturalism. And knowing, the more I learned, the more I didn't really know, and the more I wanted to know. So I went to lots of different conferences. In DC, we have a group called the Black Student Fund. I took several classes with an amazing woman named Barbara Patterson, whom I learned so much from. I was very active in the Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network. I went to the NIS Diversity Institute and started going to as many workshops and conferences as I could. I also started to read voraciously every book that came out about all areas of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I remember, I think it was around 2005, where Malcolm Gladwell published a book called Blink. And it was so interesting because it was talking about all the things that happen in your brain and kind of the blink of an eye. And now, more recently, there was a book, Thinking Fast and Slow. But this is really the first book that was kind of out there in the popular realm. And it was the first time I ever heard the term unconscious bias before. And so I thought that was just really interesting, thinking about all the things that are happening in our brain without us being aware of it. And then it was really just a few years ago that I connected in my mind my interest in diversity, equity, and multiculturalism, and kind of the unconscious bias part of it. And then magic, understanding the cognition that goes on during magic. And then it all kind of came together for me. And so what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to perform some magic for you. And then I'm going to break it down psychologically. And then we're going to go into breakouts. And I'm going to do something that magicians don't really do very often, which in your breakout session, I'm going to ask you to talk in a group about how you think I did these tricks. I also want to say my caveat too is let me stop the share here. My caveat too is that I'm going to perform these tricks not badly, like I'm going to mess up, but magic, as I teach my students, is about performance and about engagement. And I'm going to be doing rapid fire tricks without kind of the engagement part of it. Okay. So it's I'm a little, the Order of Merlin people would not be very happy with what I'm about to do, but I'm going to perform a series of tricks for you. And then I'm going to break down the brain aspects. And then I'm going to ask you to break out and kind of think about how I did what I did. Okay. So again, I'm not going to perform these like in the way I would do it normally, but just very quickly, a bunch of tricks in rapid fire. All right. So under here, I have peanut butter, and you can guess what I probably have under here. That's right. I have some jelly, some peanut butter here, and some jelly here. I'm going to try to make them switch places by saying, of course, the magic word abracadabra. And well, the peanut butter is here and the jelly is here. What I'm trying to do is actually make the peanut butter go here and the jelly go here, but it's not working because the peanut butter is here and the jelly is here. But so what can you do? Maybe I'll try to maybe switch them, and no, it's not working because the peanut butter is here and the jelly is here. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make the peanut butter go here and the jelly go here, but really the peanut butter is here and the jelly is here. All right, trick number one. Let's see, trick number two is a really quick one. And usually I have a routine with potato chips and things like that, but let's forget about that one. Let me just toss that. Okay, let me try another one over here. All right, so what I'm going to do is, let me hold that for later. All right, magicians, as you know, make things appear out of hats, but I'm going to try to make this die disappear from the hat. Again, the word abracadabra didn't work. Maybe I'll try alakazam. Maybe I'll try that. Alakazam, and not so good. Didn't make it disappear. But actually, what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to use this right here, this box right here. And you're going to see there are front doors and there are top doors. And I'm going to try to make the die disappear from the box. All right, I'm going to place it in. I want you to remember which side I put it in. It is over here. We're going to try to keep track of it. I'm going to mix it up and make it harder for you to remember where it is. All right, some people might think it's on this side. Nope, it's not there. And maybe, so it's totally disappeared, right? Because it's not in this side, right? And it's not in this side, so it must have disappeared. Actually, it didn't, it's gone. It didn't actually disappear though. It actually jumped here to the hat. Okay, that's the die check. All right, let's see. Let me do another one. All right, we have a tube here with 3 balls. We have a yellow one and a green one and a red one. I want you to look at the order that I place the balls in. First goes the yellow, then the green, and then the red. If I wave my hands over the top, the red one. Oh, I messed up that trick. All right, let's move on to another one. This is a Rubik's Cube trick. So when I was a kid, the Rubik's Cube came out and I wanted to try to solve the Rubik's Cube, but I really didn't have the patience to do it. And I would mix up the cube and I would mix it up 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 and no matter what, I couldn't solve it. But then I was like, you know what? You're a magician. So I just solved it by throwing it in the air. Okay, let's see. Okay, so those are some of the tricks. And then let me show you, this is some brain magic stuff that I'm gonna explain to you. And that is, I have a card here. So on the first side, I have 1 dot. And on the second side, I have 4 dots. And on the third side, as if a card could have 3 sides, I have 3 dots. And on the last side, I have 6 dots. So let me go through that again. The first side is 1 dot. Then the next one is 4 dots. And the next one is 3 dots. And the next one is 6 dots. And this is sort of some of the brain work that I'm talking about, because your brain, based on your prior experience, because you've seen dominoes, will actually fill things in, right? So the spot, you can see that it fills it in. This is really interesting. So you cover this and it's 4. And then you cover this and you say 6 because it looks like 6, right? Your brain is filling it in. So you can imagine what the other side looks like, right? Okay, so the other side is kind of similar, where you go like this and it's 1 because your brain doesn't, or you don't see it. And then this is 3, which is pretty cool. So this is like not magic. This is just, kind of brain science. Now, if this were really 6, that would actually be magic, right? And if this were 3, then that would be magic. And I have no idea what's happening on the other side, but that's another situation. And let me do a couple more. All right. And so this one, let's see, let me do this. Get this ready here. All right, I have a rope here and I'm going to grab the middle, that's about the middle right there, and bring it up here. And I'm going to give the rope a little cut. Like this. All right. And now I'm going to use my magical powers that I learned in the Order of Merlin and restore the rope into one like that. Did not work. So actually, I'm going to reach in this bag. I'm going to grab some magic dust. I'm going to sprinkle it on, and that's not working very well. Okay. So let's see. I've got the 2 ropes here, and I'm going to, this is, maybe if you can avert your eyes for a second, I'm going to put the rope together the old-fashioned way, like that. That doesn't look so great. Hold on, even on Zoom. Let me trim it a little bit, like this. And, all right, that's good enough. No, that still doesn't look so good. Actually, let me grab a little bit more magic dust on the rope. And no. Okay, if you guys can do me a favor, can everyone hold up your hands like this? Everyone hold up your hands like this. And if you can grab some magic dust in the air and hold it in your fist, a big fistful of magic dust. Okay, I'm gonna grab some magic dust and sprinkle it on. But if you guys on the count of 3 can throw your magic dust. All right, let me grab a little bit more. Okay, on the count of 3, throw your magic dust. 1, 2, 3, and. Awesome. You guys did a great job with your magic dust. Thank you for sharing it. I appreciate it. And because I messed this trick up, let me just show this one again. You kind of saw a little bit how it was done, but it's still a neat trick. So let me do this. I'm going to put in the yellow and the green and the red, and then the red goes to the bottom. And then if I put this in like this, yellow even, and then I put in the green, and I put in the red, then the red jumps to the middle. So kind of neat. Okay, the last thing that I'm gonna show you before I talk to you about the brain science of it, let me see if I can get a good angle here so that you guys can see me, okay? And this is, again, kind of teaching you a little bit about specifically about misdirection. So I'm gonna tell you how magicians misdirect people. All right, so now if we were together, I would borrow a pen from somebody. And so I'm going to teach you about sleeving. What a magician will do if a magician wants to make, let's say, a magic wand or a deck of cards appear, what they will do is before they start the performance, they'll place it in their sleeve like this. Now the key is they just have to keep their hands up like this, you know, so that your elbow is bent so it doesn't fall out. And now here's the misdirection part of it, okay? So the audience's eyes always follow the magician's eyes. Also, if a magician makes a movement in one direction, then people follow that. So what you do is you look up like this, and you go like this, like you're gonna grab something, okay? And at that time, you drop your hand down. So everyone is looking up here when you drop the wand down over here, and then you go up like this. Okay, so that is how they'll do it. So again, just quickly, so you go like this, you keep it in the crook of your arm like this, and then you just at the right time, you shake it, but sometimes it doesn't come out. Actually, if you're a really good magician, you can pop it over your shoulder and actually have it come out the other sleeve. That's like a breakdancing move in the 80s that I learned that I wanted to share. So let us do this. Let me quickly talk about the brain stuff that is going on. And then we are going to give you some time together, and then we will move on to unconscious bias and make the connections. So let me do this. All right. So this is from a book called Sleight of Mind. And so what, in a nutshell, our brains have limited neurological power. And because of that, we are constantly filling things in. Our brain fills things in and makes lots of connections. As it says here, you're only aware of like 5%. You know this from if you've read Thinking Fast and Slow, about you're only aware and you're only attentive to like 5% of what's happening, because we can't, and every time we like encounter something for the first time, we can't really take it in 100%. And because of that, we're using prior experience and things to fill in all the blanks. And it says here at the bottom, so that what happens is you do that with approximations and guesses and things like that. People think they're really good at paying attention, but they're terrible at it. People think that they're really good at remembering things, but they're terrible at it. And magicians take advantage of both the lack of attention and the lack of memory, even sometimes planting false memories with people. So we're gonna do a quick brain exercise, all right? Can everyone please unmute? If everyone can unmute for just a second, all right? This is what I'm gonna do. I am going to flash a word on the screen. It's a simple word, and I'm gonna say this word is, and I want everyone to say the word that you see. It's an easy word. Then I'm gonna ask everyone a simple question, a question that you know the answer to. All right, is everybody ready? All right, this word is
Shop.
Shop.
when you get to a green light, you
Stop.
Go.
when you get to a green light,
Yeah.
right. Okay. So, all right. So if everyone can mute again. So that's called priming. Okay. I primed your brain by saying shop. I didn't ask, right? And I said, when you get to a green light, I didn't, mumble my words or anything. I just asked you a question that everyone knows the answer to. But this is an example of how our brains, especially under kind of duress, especially when there is like a time crunch, and there's kind of a sensitivity there, our brain is even more likely to take those shortcuts. So again, an example of what our brain is doing. If you look at the picture of the bus, you know what the other side of the bus looks like, right? Because you've seen a bus before. Your brain doesn't have to waste energy because you know it looks pretty much what's on that side of the bus. Okay, this is Kiki Davis, our Director of Diversity and Inclusion. if you were to come across Kiki peeking her head out from behind a door, you would not freak out and think, why is Kiki's head floating in a doorway, right? Because you know that Kiki's body is behind the doorway. Your brain is just filling all of that information in, that it's doing all the time. Now, you may wonder, oh, I think there's one more picture. So schema. So this is how we develop a sense of how we see the world. Now, you may be wondering, for someone like myself who has been performing magic since I was 5 and studying magic for decades now, do I get fooled by magic? All the time, because these things that happen in one's brains, even if you're really knowledgeable about them, even if you're really experienced in them, they're so powerful that they still happen, and I still get fooled. Now, sometimes afterwards I can think, oh yeah, and I can piece it together, but sometimes I can't even do that. So what we're gonna do is, just for a couple minutes for fun, again, magicians are not supposed to ask people to do this, but I'm going to ask you, we're gonna put you into groups, and I want you to just talk about how you think the tricks are done. So let me quickly review what they are. So there's a peanut butter and jelly trick. There was the trick with the hat and the die. I made a mistake with this one, so you already know that one. There was the Rubik's Cube trick that I threw in the air and solved. The die trick, that's just magnets, you probably know that. Anyway, the cut and restored rope trick. I'm sorry, I should say in advance, I can't tell anyone how to do it. I did the card trick that I did for some of you before we started. Then I really would get kicked out of the International Brotherhood of Magicians for doing that. So I'm sorry, I can't tell that one. I could, at the end, if you're interested, you could chat me and I could tell you where you could find that one. But anyway, we're gonna go into groups. Nick is helping me out. We're gonna go into groups for 2 minutes, discuss how you thought the tricks were done, and then we will come back.
Okay, I'm sending everybody to the rooms. Okay, so Bob, is just only you and myself.
Great. Oh, there's someone who I think came in. Can she be put in?
Yeah. I'm gonna assign her right now. So we have a number of folks. So we have the first room with 4, and after that is 3, and then there's a group of 2.
Okay, great.
And yeah, it's gonna be 2 minutes so far. It's 1 minute and basically 50 seconds have passed. And remember, we had a timeout of 30 seconds, so they know to return.
Perfect. I forgot one slide, but that's all right. I think I covered that anyway, so, okay.
Next 30 seconds for the 2 minutes, and
Great. Okay.
15 seconds, and 5. And again, some people will jump off immediately. Some other are gonna let it stay. Okay, we should have some people coming back anytime soon.
Great.
I guess they're gonna run the clock out. So yeah.
Welcome back. Good to see everybody again. Welcome to folks who are new. For folks who are new, you're about to see how magicians do magic tricks without seeing them perform. So that's kind of neat. All right, let me go through some of these tricks. And again, this is I'll talk about kind of the psychology of it. So with, let me put this back up here. So with magic, again, your brain is constantly filling things in. And so, so this is, we know what a jar of peanut butter looks like, right? Because we've seen jars of peanut butter. This one happens to be hollow. And so there's a little hole in here. So I'm able to release the peanut butter, at will. So that's how that one works. We all know what a ketchup bottle looks like because we've seen, millions of ketchup bottles our whole lives. This is a very expensive ketchup bottle because it can squish up into just a little teeny, ball. So you can put that in here. This one, this is so, all these people who create these tricks are just so incredibly clever. Let me show you how this one works. I place, so this is a wooden die, okay, that has a metal sheath on it that has a fake wood interior, okay? So what I did is I have the die and I place it in the hat, okay? And I say it doesn't disappear, and then I just take out the shell part of it and I leave the wooden die in, okay? So then it comes to this part here. And what I did is I placed it in like this. So from this point of view, it looks like that. But from my point of view, it looked like this. So it basically goes in and becomes invisible. And then the kicker of this is there is a piece of wood in the base of this thing that just slides back and forth. So the die isn't sliding back and forth at all. It's called a convincer. There's just a piece of wood in here that's sliding back and forth. So then not only is it visual, but it's auditory as well. This trick, so if anyone is around my age, you may remember a magician named Doug Henning, a Canadian, curly-haired Canadian magician who performed live on television. And that's where I saw this Rubik's Cube for the first time. Does anyone know, what are some guesses about how the Rubik's Cube trick is done? Does anyone want to unmute and share? Rubik's Cube is very popular right now. If you go on like Penn and Teller Fool Us, tons of people are doing Rubik's Cube tricks. Does anyone have a guess about how this was done? No. So nowadays, like I've got other Rubik's Cube tricks that are kind of crazy, like devices and things like that. This trick works is that they're just mismatched stickers on the bottom of this. And so there's a pattern that the cube is in that I just know how to solve it. It's just a quick little pattern that I put it in. And then so basically I rotate it around and I solve the cube except for the side facing you. And then I just go like this and I throw it in up and I catch it. So it's just, and again, your brain is filling in, your brain fills in and that there's stickers all on the bottom that are the same color or red, but it's just multiple stickers. So that's how that works. The cut and restored rope is really interesting because what's happening here is, let me keep an eye on time. I get so caught up in magic sometimes. Okay, so what's happening here? This is really interesting. And this is a lot of things happening in your brain at the same time. So in magic, you want the fake thing to look like the real thing. Okay, so if I were to pull the middle of the rope up like this and cut it, then I would have two separate ropes and I do not have the magical powers to put the rope back together. So what I do instead is when I pull the rope up, I do a little loop here. So I do a little loop. And then when I'm cutting the rope, I'm only cutting off about 4 inches of the rope. Okay. So it'll come together in a second. So I go like this. I pretend to put it together with my fingers. Now I go to the bag and I pull out some invisible magic dust. And the only reason why I'm doing that is I'm priming your brain to feel like it is natural and normal for me. I'm conditioning it to go into this bag to pull some invisible dust, okay? So now I drop this. And so the interesting thing about this is your brain fills in what it thinks 2 ropes should look like behind my hand, right? 2 ropes. But it's really just a little loop over a long rope, okay? But you see in your mind's eye, you see 2 ropes starting at the beginning and going to the end. So then when I am supposedly tying the ropes together, I'm just tying a knot around a rope. If I were, I could slide this off right now, okay? Then I trim the rope. Then I go back to the bag for some more magic dust. That again gets you used to me going back to the bag, okay? Then I distract you by having everybody raise their hands. And then while I'm doing that, I'm twisting this around my head and I'm taking the knot off in my hand like this. And I hold this up so that you're looking at this. Now I'm holding the knot in my hand. This is why I kept going to the bag before for the invisible magic dust, so I can ditch this knot in the bag. Okay, so I go for some dust. I even go for some more dust and I go like that. And then, now the last one I want to show you is really interesting too, this one. So I really can't make a marker go up over my shoulders and out my sleeve. But what I did do is I taught you about misdirection and then I misdirected you. So what I did, so I explained to you how I put this in my sleeve like this, which magicians really do this. So called sleeving. They really hold their hands like this. They really do look up like this when they drop their hand like this, okay? And then they really will kind of go like this and make something appear. Then I say to you, I'm gonna do it again, but I actually don't really do it again. I go like this and I never put it in this sleeve. I never put it, I just keep it in this hand, okay? So I go like this and I tell you I'm gonna do it again. Now your attention drops because you think I'm telling you how to do it even though I'm not. Okay, so then I go like this and I look here, which makes you look here. And I go like this. Now you can see my hand now, which is the way it was before. This does not look normal, but you're not looking, because I'm looking over here and I'm looking over here like this, and I shake this and I pretend like it goes over and then I go like this. So it's amazing. Again, I get fooled all the time, as even though I know these brain type things that are happening. Just very quickly too. So I just listened to a magic podcast last week, and there was a guy named Michael Close who presented, and he kind of took this to the next level, where he talked about, these are, even going into a magic show, these are assumptions that you make that are like beyond what you would imagine. Like you think that when the curtain goes up, the show has started, but maybe it actually started before and the magician or his or her helpers were getting information. If you see a trick happen that kind of goes on and it unfolds, it may unfold that way the next show or it may not. There are all these different assumptions that we make. Okay, so as I said, I mean, this is really cool, I think. I mean, as you can tell, I'm really excited about magic, like all the things that happens in your brain. This is not really cool when it comes to how this can negatively impact us as individuals and then collectively as a society. Now, I want to say at the outset that there is implicit bias or unconscious bias. They're kind of used interchangeably. And then there's explicit bias. And this is not about explicit bias. I do not know what would lead someone to walk with a Confederate flag breaking into the Capitol or a neo-Nazi flag. I do not, the explicit kind of racism, I can't explain Charlottesville. I'm sure there are books about it, but that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is what Beverly Tatum, who wrote a long time ago, Why Are the Black Kids Sitting Together at the Cafeteria, talks about this fog that we all live in. We're soaking in information from friends, from family, from the media, from news, from movies, and we're soaking in all of these messages all of the time. And that is what leads to this unconscious or implicit bias that we have. So I'm going to put up a parallel slide to the one that I showed about magic, based on a couple of books that have been published within the last probably year or so, The Person You Mean to Be or Bias. And this is, you'll see this is very similar information to what I shared about with magic, which is that social scientists, neuroscientists know that that most of what we experience is unconscious, and the decisions that we make are really unconscious. Okay, so that's the first part. The second part has to do with how we make sense of the world. Again, we don't have the neuro power to analyze everything 100% every time we see it. So one of the ways we make sense of the world is by categorizing things. We put things into categorizes to make it easier when we see something another time, we kind of know what category it's in. And so as you can see here in the second quotation is that beliefs and attitudes then get associated with certain things that we've categorized, and it happens unintentionally, and it gets triggered, and it happens just right away. So we're categorizing things. Beliefs and attitudes are connected with those things or those people, or people with certain backgrounds or certain traits. And then hardwired might be an exaggeration, but it becomes something that gets unconsciously triggered without us having so much control over it. And then the last point here is that in magic, I talked about how, we see things, sometimes things are in front of us, but we don't see them, or we don't see things that are in front of us, like with the pen and the dots was the previous example. Well, we go through our lives then, seeing what we want to see, hearing what we want to hear, okay, because of the two things above it, because of how our brain works and because of categorizing and associating things. And so this is the technical term for this is confirmation bias. So we look generally, it makes life simpler, easier, more consistent, more predictable, more clear, if we look for things that support our beliefs and we ignore things that don't support our beliefs. This happens kind of like that shop stop example, for those of you who are here for that. This happens under stress, under duress, under time pressures. These things happen and connected even faster. Something that's interesting, kind of like the equivalent of those Michael Close things, is that there are iceberg pictures like this that are for identifiers. So those, for those of us who are involved in DEIB work, we talk about the 8 big identifiers: gender, sexual orientation, age, race, et cetera. And so, but like, look down of all of these different aspects of being a human being that we're not even aware of. And so we have associations with all of these things that are below the surface, in addition to those traits that are ones that we talk most about, like, let's say gender or race, skin color. I want to share a quick personal story with you. So I attended Brown University up in Rhode Island. I was up there for my 5-year reunion. I was really excited to see the president of the university speak. And she was speaking in a building that I didn't know where it was because it didn't exist when I was there. So I got out a map. This is 1996, right? I didn't have a phone. So I got out a map and I'm looking for where this building is because I have no idea. My wife is with me too. We're looking for it and we're lost. We can't find it. And so I decided at that point that I am going to ask for help, and I'm going to ask a student or somebody where this building is so I can see the president of the university speak. So I look up from the map and I see a young man who looks like this. Now this is current clothing. He was not wearing, current kind of popular clothing, but I remember the young man was wearing what was very kind of popular at the time, kind of an urban look of, some of you remember, like jeans pulled down all the way down with like boxer shorts. And so a Black young man walks by and I don't really note him because right behind him is a family that looks like this. And I remember there's a girl who looks college age. She's wearing a floral print Laura Ashley type dress. And I go up to the white family that looks like this, and I say, can you tell me where such and such building is? And they look confused because they say, we don't go to school here. We don't know. And the young man who looked more like this heard me and very kindly turned around and walked back. And he said, I'm a student here and let me kind of direct you into, and so he told me where the building was. Now, in the moment, I was grateful to him and I thanked him and I was mortified. I was mortified that and felt embarrassed and I felt guilty because I knew what I had done. I had seen this young man, not this young man, but a young man, Black young man, and dismissed him as someone who was not going to help me find the instructions, the directions. And so if you had asked me at the time, do Black students attend Brown University? I would say, yes. Do Black students, or students at university wear all kinds of clothing? I would say, yes, I understand that. If someone had said, are you glad that there is a lot of diversity at Brown and there are young Black men at Brown? I would say, of course, of course. Someone asked me, do you have positive feelings about Black people? I would say, yes. Are you comfortable with Black people? I grew up in lots of diverse settings, absolutely. And still my mind dismissed him and went to the white floral print family. And so that, again, that was mortifying. I would love to say too, it's the last time I ever made a connection like that erroneously, but that would be a lie as well, because I have done that, again, unconsciously and sometimes realizing, and I'm sure sometimes not before. Debbie Irving, who wrote Waking Up White, talks about the difference between guilt and shame. She said shame is not productive and guilt's okay. She said it's okay to feel a little guilty sometimes, and guilt is something that you can work through, and it can be a motivator to kind of make better decisions. Now, again, the societal consequences of unconscious bias, that's not what I'm going to talk about today. Reading How to Be an Anti-Racist, reading the book Bias that I mentioned before that talks about systemic racism. Those are huge issues. Even Rex Kennedy wrote, How to Be an Anti-Racist. Those are huge topics and really important topics. And we talk about criminal justice, we talk about policing, we talk about education, we talk about housing, we talk about systems. And so that is something really important to discuss, which is not my focus. So my focus for our last 15 minutes together is about kind of unconscious bias within individuals and within school communities, because we are school people. And so let's do this. Why don't we're gonna go into a chat again. And I'm gonna ask you again, just for a couple minutes, to talk about what are the implications of unconscious bias in a school setting? What are they interpersonally? And what are they for your school community? Okay, so given the fact that we all have unconscious bias, what are the consequences? Nick, could you put folks in a breakout? We'll just do a couple minutes and then we'll come back together.
Okay, everybody go into breakouts. Hi, Arlis, this is Nicholas. If you get an invitation to join the room, please accept that. Otherwise, you'll be here and we won't have a chance to discuss.
too. I was muted too. Welcome back, everybody. Let's see. I am going to move forward. I hope that I thought our conversation was really was helpful and interesting, and just want to kind of move forward given our brief time. Okay, so the question is, how can we eliminate our unconscious bias? And the short answer is we can't. Just like with the magic, like I've studied it my whole life. I still get fooled. We can't do it. But I'm going to go through now techniques and different ways of mitigating against bias. I'm going to go through them quickly, but I know this is being recorded if folks want to go back. Also, my email will be at the end. I'm sure Carney Sando has it too. I'd love to continue to engage in the conversations about unconscious bias and or magic. So these are different. So the first thing we need to do is just acknowledge it. And I'm sure anyone on this Zoom knows and is aware that we each have unconscious bias. Some people suggest doing an audit, and kind of, if you even were to just start with the big 8 identifiers and kind of realistically look and say, you know, am I like, where do I interact with people of this certain group or background? What are my feelings? When you're in settings, to think about, Dolly Chugh talks about this, about being aware of your own opinions and judgments and things like that. Something else too, which I thought was interesting, I haven't heard it phrased like this, which is acknowledge our ordinary privilege. So I'm very familiar with like white privilege, with Peggy McIntosh's Unpacking the Backpack of White Privilege. I've read other books that talk about different privileges, but what she encouraged us to do is, in whatever setting we're in, this is all contextual, and I like how she kind of goes through these different ways, is to understand that we may have privilege in a certain context and maybe not in another context. And I also like the concept that that Debbie Irving points out in Waking Up White, is about headwinds and tailwinds. So in a given circumstance, because of our ordinary privilege, we may have tailwinds, things that push us forward, while other people who don't have that particular privilege have headwinds. And so what can we do in that particular context when we have the tailwinds moving us forward, to support those and help advocate for and affirm those who have the headwinds? And so I thought that was a really interesting concept of ordinary privilege. Obviously, there are people like white men like myself who societally have more privilege, but there are lots of different situations where each of us has individual privilege. Develop a growth mindset. We can obviously read Carol Dweck and where she talks just about mindset, but I also want to recommend another book that is lesser known than any of the ones that I've shown or mentioned so far, which is called 4 Days to Change. It is put out by the White Men as Full Diversity Partners. It is directed specifically towards white men, and I think that other people would really get a lot from the book. They do 4-day retreats for white men, mostly in the business world. And this is, I don't know if it's allegorical or actual, but this is about a 4-day retreat that goes on. And here it lists, and so I recommend that you read the book. There also, you can go online and you can find out how to develop each of these mindsets. Literally, it will say in the book, mindset number 1. It will have a chapter, mindset number 2. And I think all of these are really good and really important. So develop a growth mindset. Actively seek counterexamples to counter our biases. So we can do that through, there's so much on like Netflix and stuff. We can do that through films. We can do that through documentaries. We can do that through feature films. These are podcasts that I listened to last summer because, you know, there wasn't much going on last summer. I mean, there was for work, getting ready for school, but it's not like I was like going away anywhere. These are just podcasts I listen to. I'm always one. I grew up in DC. I've always read the Washington Post, and I always read liberal and conservative columnists. If you want to read a real liberal perspective, listen to Pod Save America. If you want a conservative perspective and hearing two conservatives argue then about issues, then look at What the Hell is Going On. Mark Thiessen, the host, is my brother-in-law, and so that's how I found out about that podcast. The Heart, which is in the middle, I listened to a series called Race Trader, which was done by a self-described Jewish lesbian feminist. And so that was a really interesting perspective. So we can listen to podcasts. The other thing that I would recommend is fiction. I think a lot of people go to the books that, people are reading How to Be an Anti-Racist now. People are reading like Caste, which, was done by the author of The Warmth of Other Suns. But read fiction. The Sellout is one of my favorite books I've ever read. It's a racial satire, if one could believe that there is something called a racial satire. But Joy Luck Club came out 20 years ago. I just thought it was so interesting and learned a lot about Asian American community, and have had really interesting discussions about Asian Americans of different age groups. So seek counterexamples of our biases. Spend time with people who are different than we are. This is a funny one. We shouldn't curate friendships of people of different backgrounds. And at the same time, think about where you go to church or synagogue. I'm Jewish. Think about the kinds of things you do in the community, especially post-COVID, pre-COVID, post-COVID. Like, what are things that you can do within the community that you're interested anyway with people who are different than you, however you may define it. So that is another way to address our unconscious bias. Explicitly engage in conversations with other people about bias. At St. Stephen's, St. Agnes, I've been doing this work at the school for over 25 years, but something amazing has happened this year. And we have in family groups, we're in groups of 6 to 8 people. We've been in since the summer, and we have conversations, books that we've read together, and we are having very open, very honest, pretty raw discussions about race. Be careful. I say this with a word of caution. Be careful about putting the burden on somebody to tell you their feelings about their own race and their own experience. Every time somebody of a different background than I tells me about their life experience and shares that, I see it as a precious gift, but it can't be an expectation. And just probably at your schools too, and for many on this Zoom, our Black and brown colleagues are exhausted and are feeling things deeply in a way that I am not, and I need to be particularly wary about not putting an extra burden. And so I need to do those work myself. See difference. We shouldn't say we're colorblind. I don't care if people are black, brown, or polka dot or blue or whatever. Like, it's really important to see difference. If you have young children, if they see someone of a different background or color and they say, oh, that lady has brown skin, don't say hush, shush. That tells them that they'll make negative associations, which we talked about. I mean, Barbara Patterson from the Black Student Fund taught me, which I do with all my kids, is someone says, oh, that lady has brown skin. Yes, isn't it beautiful? It's the color of coffee. And then you it's okay. It's okay to observe difference. It's how you kind of react to it, which is the most important thing. Commit to confronting bias. This is really hard. I mean, we could spend hours just talking about this. This is something that Dolly Chugh recommends you say if you're having a conversation. I see it differently. Are you open to listening to my perspective? She talks about 20% who are kind of easy to kind of engage in, the middle 60, which is a little tougher but not impossible, and then the 20% that you maybe don't even want to engage in bias. Howard Stevenson, Dr. Howard Stevenson from University of Pennsylvania came to our school like 15 years ago and was working with students, where if a student says something, racially insensitive, you say, what do you mean by that? You don't even have to say it with judgment, but it's enough to stop people and make them think about what they're saying. I also wanted to share, if you're on the receiving end of something racist, racially oriented, this is also from Dr. Howard Stevenson, his book on racial literacy. He spoke to us last year at St. Stephen's, St. Agnes, and this is just how we can kind of cope ourselves with, negative racial attitudes. The question you've been asking, well, Bob, if my bias is unconscious, how can I be aware of it? Some of you are familiar with the IAT test. Go to Project Implicit. It's really interesting. Go online, sign up for a different category of something that you're interested in. Maybe you think it's a strength. Maybe you think it's a weakness. And what it does is it puts pictures and words up on the screen, and you have to associate them with either good, positive, or negative words. And it's not only testing what words you're putting with what images, but it's also testing the amount of time and how quickly. And they've done this with tens or hundreds of thousands of people. There's a book called Blindspot written about it, but you can start to see where you may have unconsciously, it uncovers unconscious biases. These are some of the exercises that it gives. Just a final thought is if you kind of looking at this thread as our lives together, we're in really contentious, difficult times right now as a society. And there are times where There are times where things are pretty good and times where they're not so good, times where things are pretty stable and times where things are unsettled, times where there is some stability and times where there's a lot of conflict, which really kind of tears us apart. But we can, if we get together like this and we continue to talk together and we continue to learn together, we continue to read together and discuss together. If we do that, then hopefully it can be restorative and things can be a lot smoother and more complete for us